a lot of people bring raps to me that they want confirmation or disconfirmation on. And I passed this way last night when I talked about the rules of evidence. The standard of discourse has decayed to the point where it's very hard to get any kind of consensus about anything, because most people participating don't know how the game is played. And linguistic viruses really are responsible for much more of reality than we suppose. I suppose I can't really talk about this without stepping on somebody's toes. So let me pick. Well, for example, crop circles. Crop circles are important, and what was going on at the England end was these things were absurd. I mean, you had only to see one to understand what was going on, and to see that a confluence of British eccentricity, ripe grain, a certain ambiance in the air was allowing these things to come into being, and then the media was fanning it into existence. Well, now, how does this work? Talking of coupled oscillators and Persinger and all that. Pardon me?
Repeat that law.
Oh, that the paranormal phenomenon has an impact in an inverse square relationship to the distance you are from the event. You see? Because here's how it works. The media is reporting the onrushing phenomenon of existence. Stock markets, wars, diplomatic meetings, gangster killings, so forth and so on. Then something weird happens. Now, I have a job, you have a job. We note that something weird has happened. But it doesn't affect us. But scattered through the society, there are people who, when they open their paper and say, strange pattern in Wheatfield near Wiltshire, they look and say, aha, I knew it. This is what we've been waiting for. This is the sign. And they jump in their car and they drive to Wiltshire to look at the crop circle. And they get there first. Well, then comes the press. And they say, well, what is this? Say, well, the farmer doesn't know. And everybody's standing around. And finally, the weird person takes courage and says, well, actually, I've been studying a peculiar form of biological energy for some 30 years, and my theory, and you're off and running at that point. And so weirdness attracts weirdos, who then interpret the weirdness very weirdly, because they came with sharpened axes to grind, you see. And the crop circle thing was a test case for this. This is why I spend so much time on it. It did no credit to anybody. The occult just went sailing over the edge. And science hardly behaved any better, because there was this guy, if any of you are interested in this, there's a wonderful book called Around in Circles by Jim Schnabel that goes into all this. But there was a fellow named Terence Mckenna who was a meteorologist. And when the first crop circles appeared and the weirdos began talking about telluric forces, messages from Atlantis, and so forth and so on, he jumped into the fray and said, nonsense, nonsense. This is a meteorological phenomenon. In the warm days of summer, on the lee side of these certain kinds of hills, a kind of circular low-pressure wind can get going, and this is nothing to get excited about, and we've got the statistics and so forth and so on. And the press loved him. They loved him as much as the screwballs. And they would put him on, and first they would interview the mad people, and then Terence Mckenna would come on and poo-poo it away. So that was the first year of the crop circles. The next year, the crop circles became considerably more elaborate, with arrows coming off of them and zigzags and so forth and so on. Bring Terence Mckenna on to the scene. And he says, well, you know, the new field of dynamic instability indicates that the mathematical solutions to these breakdown states are very complicated and unusual patterns. And so then the next year, it was inconceivably complex, the crop circles. Meanwhile, you know, crop circle time is in the springtime. It's dead in the winter because the fields are empty. So Mckenna had used the winter time to go to the Institute of Electrostatic Physics in Nagoya, and came back full of talk about roving plasmic fields and this sort of thing. And armed with the roving plasmic fields, no crop circle was too bizarre to not be proclaimed the product of natural forces. And this went on. And finally, BBC Two, and you know, you can think about this what you like, but they made a crop circle in frustration with this whole thing. They made a crop circle. And among the crop circle cognoscenti, there are certain moves that are the favorite moves, that are the authenticating moves, the no human being could possibly do it moves. And so the BBC Two people made a very good crop circle. And they brought Terence Mckenna out and said, you know, Terence, we've just spotted one over here, and we'll get you right to the scene before the tourists get there. And they toured with him, and he pointed out, you know, the distinguishing characteristics, no doubt about it. And then they sat him down in the center of this field, and they said, Terence, we made it. And, you know, it's a horrible thing, actually, to see a grown man cry. Because, you know, I mean, he is devastated. And then, you know, and this is just one of moments. You know, Rupert, my comrade in arms, Sheldrake, was one of the people who sponsored the contest that basically put the crop circles out of business, because the claims were fantastic, you know. No person could do this, so forth and so on. So what they did is they got farmers to donate 10-acre tracts of English corn, which is wheat, and for £50 you could enter. And everybody had to make the same crop circle, which was one chosen to have all the difficult little schmiggies in it. And you could use no lights. You had to go into the field at 10 p.m. and be out by 4 a.m. And at dawn, you know, the helicopters flew over with the video crews, and then crop circles were toured on the ground and awards were made. And this guy, Jim Schnabel, who wrote this book I mentioned, by himself, in total darkness, in 2.5 hours, made the winning entry. And it was a very close tie between him and a helicopter crew from a nearby air base who also made one. So, and yet, and this is to some degree the whole point of the story, and yet there are people whose eyes fill with tears when I do this rap, because they haven't heard. And it will never die now, I'm convinced. It's an informational virus loose in the world. And, you know, crop circles will occasionally appear, but it was really a breakout that was so predictable from the unconscious that it amazed me while it was going on how many friendships were strained over this thing.